Act 3. We found living proof. Chapter 25. Children are born equal. William J. Martin asked, "Why me?" I lived very close to where Richard Speck murdered the nurses, and on the morning of July 14th, 1966, I was the altar boy at 6:30 Mass and saw him. When Richard Speck's picture was in the newspapers, my first reaction was that I had seen him the day before. There were several motels on Stony Island, and it was common to see people around who didn't live in the neighborhood. But because the murders were so close to us, we all followed the case. And I observed your career. I'm involved in the apartment rental fraud case and would like you to represent me. William Martin sat back in his chair and looked puzzled. There was a person who said they saw someone looking like Speck down in that area, but there were so many people who reported seeing him, and we apprehended him quickly, so it didn't matter. Why me? He asked again. You got Speck the electric chair, but you don't believe in the death penalty. I believe you understood Richard Speck and knew he didn't have a chance in life. I can identify with Richard Speck. I understand him too. How so? He asked. All babies are born equal, but life is unfair. Anger is present because we never had a chance, and we know it. Others are born privileged and go to great schools, earn a living, and their children have chances too. The generations evolve. Society judges us as losers, and that's the space where the serial killer's jealousy, rage, and revenge are born. Martin became pensive and said, Continue. I believe you understand this, and that's why you don't believe in the death penalty. Society can't let the Richard Specks walk around, and they must be locked up forever. But to kill someone who never had a chance? I can't get on board with capital punishment either. Tell me more, Martin said. There was a young lady that needed protecting from bad guys at the rental company. She would most likely be raped, maybe killed, and I stopped it. I was there, the predators were there, and the victim was there. We met at a specific time under a ladder. The only thing keeping me from becoming Richard Speck was saving her. You must get me out of this thing. The first one to plead guilty is the first to walk, Martin added. I reached into my pocket and brought out a piece of paper with a name and number, and he picked it up and studied it. Harvey Geller lives in D.C. and is from Park Lawn Cemetery. He knows all about this and will be a character witness. I'm an alcoholic and attend AA meetings, and many people will write letters to the judge and say I'm not such a bad guy. I didn't take any of the stolen money, and I have $5,000 that dropped out of the sky. I have a job and can pay you more over time. What do you think? I'll make some inquiries and represent you, Martin said. 2 weeks later, William J. Martin and I met with a United States Attorney, Joan Safford, at the Dirksen Federal Building.
21 counts of conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud, a 5-year sentence for each count. Combined counts total 105 years. How do you want to plead?
Joan Safford asked. Before answering, William J. Martin asked, What are the allegations based on?
The use of newspapers, television, and radio, and the crossing of state lines with the intent to commit fraud,
Joan Safford said. I had nothing to do with the advertising, I said.
But you did know the ads were fraudulent.
No, I said. As far as I knew, there were no exact addresses used, only vicinities. To my knowledge, there were apartments in those vicinities for rent. And once again, I had nothing to do with the actual advertising.
You were the office salesman. Cody Jarrett was the alias that you used.
Cody Jarrett is a nickname, a name people remember because of its unusual sound. It's a common practice in sales to use a name easily remembered.
Cody Jarrett is the name Jimmy Cagney used in White Heat. Jimmy Heaney, Jimmy Cagney, Cody Jarrett, your alter ego, all the same. The alias you used was to honor a criminal's name.
Joan Safford glared at me, then opened a file on the table and said,
These individuals were defrauded out of money.
Have you verified that none of the clients received apartments? I asked. She turned her glare at William J. Martin.
Counselor, I thought your client agreed to cooperate with us.
William J. Martin silenced me with a look and addressed Safford. My client did not profit. By your reports, $700,000 to $1 million was stolen. We can prove that people found apartments. Joan Safford was annoyed. Sure, she had complaints, but she didn't have all the files, and she didn't have the cherished pictures of people in new apartments. Miss Safford, my client's reasons for being there are not what you think.
Untrue! Nick Shore claims that Cody Jarrett turned a small operation into a high-wire act, and $1 million was stolen very quickly. How do you explain Washington, D.C.? It shows conspiracy, and he was there. He's a part of this case. And you're going to jail, Cody.
I disagree, I said. William J. Martin motioned me with his hand to be quiet. Washington was a major error in judgment on my client's part, but it produced a defining moment.
And what was that?
She asked. In Washington, my client chose between right and wrong. Harvey Geller from Park Lawn Cemetery in Washington, D.C. will be his witness and testify that he met Jim before he was arrested. He has been working for the last 2 years and attending AA meetings. William J. Martin forged on. Think carefully about this. We argue that a young man who needed a job woke up in front of a help wanted sign and worked for very little money so that he could protect a young woman. A jury will hear what was about to happen to Cherish and that he influenced her to quit. There will be testimony that an investigator from the Attorney General's office had a cup of coffee with Jim at a diner and asked Jim to be an informant. Jim disclosed the situation with Cherish. William J. Martin sat silent for a moment, as did Joan Safford. The investigator told Jim what was going on. We're going to ask him why he didn't stop the crimes against the citizens of Chicago. Why didn't the authorities tell Cherish to leave the position? Nobody cared, and she is currently a school teacher. Joan Safford sat silent and glared at me.
The authorities are not on trial here,
she said. Perhaps not, but the government should protect its citizens, Martin said. Joan Safford leaned over the table.
I'm interested in a guilty plea from your client.
She stared me down, and William Martin said, We have a common interest because we all want the perps in prison. However, we have pictures of Cherish and their families in their new homes. If we go to trial, we will show the pictures to the jury, and everyone may be acquitted. But what if we were able to say that Jim would plead guilty? The other defendants will fall like dominoes, and they will all go to prison. Bob has pictures too, I added.
So you'll plead guilty to all 21 counts?
Safford asked. William J. Martin said, No. You drop 20 counts. Jim pleads guilty to 1, and you supply an agreement that includes probation and strict sobriety guidelines. If he drinks or breaks any of the probation rules, you revoke his probation and imprison him for 5 years. I don't know about the drinking part, I said. Joan Safford's hand twitched a bit, and she asked,
And you will give us information on the other wrongdoing?
I don't know anything about that. I like to drink and would leave every night to drink. She sat back in her chair, thought for a few seconds, and looked at me.
The new U.S. attorney will have to approve the sentencing recommendation, but we can agree in principle for now.
On the ride down the elevator in the Dirksen building, William J. Martin said, She thinks you will drink again and place you in prison. Copy that, I said. On October 21st, 1981, Dan K. Webb was sworn in as acting U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois and approved my 5-year probationary period. On November 23rd, 1981, I stood before Judge Bua, and William J. Martin stated that I had turned my life around and deserved the 5-year probationary period the U.S. Attorney's Office agreed to. Joan Safford described me as a master swindling con man who would strike again. Judge Bua listened intently to both sides and asked if I wanted to say something. I'm a vigilant member of Alcoholics Anonymous, I said, and believe the key for me is not to drink again. If I do, I should be imprisoned and will deserve it. Judge Bua granted the 5-year probation period, and in his final words, referred to the letters written by the members of Alcoholics Anonymous and cautioned, if I broke any of the probationary guidelines, I would serve a prison term of 5 years. Over the following months, the guilty were all sentenced to prison terms, all except the nobody, me. Chapter 26. Alcoholics Anonymous. People mulled around, greeting each other, and there was a desk facing chairs in the front of the room. Within feet of the desk was an older, thin man with a chiseled face carved from stone, and as I sat down, his long, slender hand gently rang a bell. I was attending my first meeting with Alcoholics Anonymous. The people took a seat, and the elderly gentleman welcomed everyone and then asked if anyone in the room was at their first meeting, and I did not say anything. Next, a person in the crowd read something called How It Works. After the reading, the older man described his life to the crowd as a drunk and sober person. Jack R. said that most days he would finish drinking at a gin mill open until 5 in the morning. One night, the saloon's door was locked when he arrived. While standing in disappointment, another fellow approached the bar and, upon seeing the establishment closed, was relieved and felt the luck of the moment. Jack R. was curious about the man's gratefulness and asked why he was thankful. The other fellow said that he had been sober for 2 years and attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, but was having difficulty because his son had an incurable disease. He felt sorrow and decided to drink. However, he felt relieved that a drunken crisis had been diverted. Jack R. felt compassion for the man and asked if it would help his son if he got drunk. The other fellow said no, it would not, and in the wee morning hours, the two men intervened on behalf of each other and became close friends, and to date, were sober. Jack R. decided to attend Alcoholics Anonymous and said it was an act of divine providence that helped him. I decided that I was in the perfect place at the ideal time, and while listening to Jack R.'s story of hope, I reflected on a plaque sitting on the desk, which read, The 12 Steps. 1. I can't. 2. God can. 3. Let God. 4. Look within. 5. Admit wrongs. 6. Prepare for change. 7. Seek God's help. 8. Become willing. 9. Make amends. 10. Daily inventory. 11. Pray and meditate. 12. Give it away. I entered an old memory, and under the lights in Miss Hope's basement, saw her walk over to the small wooden desk and remove a piece of paper and a pen. She sat at the table writing for a minute and then handed the paper to me. Looking at the plaque and remembering what Miss Hope had written for me, the meeting ended, and I settled into the eyes of Jack R. Does it make sense? He asked. About 15 years ago, someone gave me something similar, and she said if I practiced them, I would understand the mysteries of the soul. She was an old lady. You ever get any old ladies coming through here? Jack R. smiled and said, All kinds of people come through AA. Some stay and some leave. How about you? Are you staying a while? There's another meeting tonight at 6 o'clock. I don't know. I'm not sure if this will work for me, I said. You won't know if you don't try. I went to my car, sat for a while, and reflected on gardening with Miss Hope. I saw the squirrel, heard the train vadump, and remembered her last words.
Be patient. Providence surrounds you.
I wondered if Miss Hope was an alcoholic, and then cried like a baby. And then there was a tap at the window, and I thought it was a dirty copper. I'm going to get a cup of coffee. You want to tag along? Jack R. asked. What's providence mean? He smiled and said, We place ourselves under the protective care of God or nature as a spiritual power. How do I understand providence? I asked. Well, a person must live a certain way for a while, and then, after some time, they can look back at their life and see all the tiny coincidences connected. A clear picture will show how providence and the care of God have been protective in the one's life. There are no coincidences, just tiny moments swirling around simultaneously producing lessons, and the person fits into the universe's plan. Wow, That's so deep. Let me ask a question. If a person robs a bank and gets caught and does 20 years, how is that the protective care of the universe? Great question, he said, but you're not focusing on the lessons. The location doesn't matter to the universe. What's important to God is that a person evolves. Are you a bank robber? No, just curious. So you're saying that providence is like looking in a rearview mirror. If I live the right way, I will see the tiny little coincidences connected, and everything changes. Relationships, careers, purpose, and accomplishment? It does require faith that you believe that providence is real, Jack R. added. And if I believe, the universe will lead me out of multi-generational trauma? Exactly. You got it, he said. My eyes misted up, and Jack R. asked, Why the tears? I wish I could thank Miss Hope. You sure you haven't seen her? Keep coming back to meetings, and you may see her again. Jack R. became my AA sponsor, and as I shared my life, I discovered that I was not alone. I came to believe that understanding divine providence was within Miss Hope's 8 rules and the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Over time, I experienced the care and power of the universe and found the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous transformational. Chapter 27. Lakota Virtues. 12 Lakota Virtues. 1. Humility. 2. Perseverance. 3. Respect. 4. Honor. 5. Love. 6. Sacrifice. 7. Truth. 8. Compassion. 9. Bravery. 10. Fortitude. 11. Generosity. 12. Wisdom. Life wasn't perfect. At times, peace was elusive for an injured child trying to be an adult. Occasionally, I had nightmares and woke up feeling afraid, and I'd tremble over minor decisions, worried that an unseen monster would consume me, and I'd be back on Skid Row, drunk and looking for day labor. From the outside, life looked normal, and I was making a living in the window business, so I bought a home and discovered I had a knack for gardening and could keep flowers alive. These incredible successes helped tame some of the fear of failure embedded in my soul, and I became determined to create a backyard haven. I enclosed the yard with a tall yellow pine fence and poured a concrete patio surrounded by evergreen hedges and flowers. I planted a small red oak tree in one corner with white flowers that bloomed in spring, and I enjoyed the peacefulness of nature and journaled to release stress and understand my life. On an early autumn day, I stopped in a garden center for some things and saw a poster for a Native American retreat at a campground in western Illinois. Directing the seminar would be a Lakota Indian named Chief Thunderfoot, who was traveling throughout the country, instilling awareness in the community about the survival of Mother Earth. The retreat's focus would be awareness of Mother Earth and the path of forgiveness. A few weeks later, I joined 40 other people standing in a group talking at the retreat grounds as I gazed into an autumn poster card picture of green, gold, and red trees. After a few minutes of small talk, the Indian gave us the ground rules. I am Chief Thunderfoot, and I will be your guide. We're trying to help you see the Earth as a living, breathing organism, so you will treat our mother planet with reverence. It's like the bumper sticker, give a hoot, don't pollute, but in a deeper way. Our first session occurs at noon in the lodge, and there are bunkhouses down this path. To succeed, you must let us lead you to a place of awareness and forgiveness. I unpacked in the guys' bunkhouse, then walked to the lodge. It was a 1-story wooden cabin with square casement windows. The interior walls were white, and stained glass light fixtures hung from a 12-foot ceiling. The floor area was filled with couches, easy chairs, tables, and a gray stone hearth, producing a blazing fire. Thunderfoot greeted us, and then we paired into partners to vent our anger about someone who wronged us. I sat facing a polite woman named Susan, in her 50s, who stated she'd been hurt by her husband's infidelities and felt foolish for being so loyal. How could qualities such as dedication and loyalty be foolish? I asked. She lowered her head, sobbed, and looked around the room. Most pairs had a partner crying or yelling at the other partner. Thunderfoot walked around offering guidance, and he stopped when he came to us. He placed his hand on Susan's shoulder and asked me how it was going. "Your name should be Chief Handkerchief," I said. The chief grinned, and Susan raised her eyes and gave a faint smile. I nodded up toward the plaque over the fireplace and asked him, "A woman gave me something very similar to the Lakota virtues 20 years ago. Do you know Miss Hope?" The chief was puzzled and said, "I'm not sure, but just as life leads you, let us lead you to a place of awareness and forgiveness." Susan continued to cry until she had no more tears and became calm. "Switch roles now," Thunderfoot directed. I ranted about alcoholics and child abuse until I was calm, and Susan sat quietly listening. When I finished, Susan said,
I have 3 beautiful children whom we cherished. They've grown to be wonderful adults.
"Do you see them much?"
Often,
And she started sobbing again. "That's wonderful." Uh-oh. Chief passed me a Kleenex is walking to us. Susan started mixing laughing with crying and said,
stop.
"How do you laugh and cry simultaneously? That's a fabulous talent." "How's everything?" the chief asked. Poor Miss Hope was an older woman who wore black and white and had a cross hanging from her neck. She dressed like a nun and waddled like a penguin. "I don't think I've had the pleasure," the chief said. Susan looked up, grinned, and wiped her eyes. As the chief walked away, I whispered, "If Miss Hope and the chief were standing next to each other, along with a dirty copper, we'd have a Halloween party."
Stop.
She said, snickering. "Nope, it beats crying," I said. Thunderfoot took us outside when this part of the retreat had run its course. "Now we will walk with nature," he said. We hiked through the magnificent scenery until we came to a teepee-shaped hut built of mud and tree branches. "This sweat lodge is an Indian church," Chief Thunderfoot said. "Here, we will pray. The theme for our prayer is Father God and Mother Earth, providing compassion necessary for the survival of planet Earth, the animal kingdom, and humankind." There was a spot in the middle of the dirt floor, and one of Thunderfoot's helpers brought the hot rocks and placed them in the hole, then poured water on the stones to create steam. Thunderfoot prayed aloud. "Father God and Mother Earth, supply us with what is needed to grow, and instill in us the desire to nurture you." His commitment to the land touched me deeply, and I petitioned, "My Creator, I offer my life to protect the infant souls. Please grant them safe passage from babies to adults. Continue to protect the little ones, and supply the courage and wisdom to change what I can. Amen." We prayed into the darkness, continuously offering hope to the universe, when Thunderfoot said, "This afternoon, we vented our anger against those who harmed us. Let us now switch our focus to our part in the relationship. How have we retaliated against those who attacked us and brought peace and kindness to the relationship? When facing these questions honestly, mercy will be possible." The outpouring of his thoughts inspired an aspiration that would be stronger than generational trauma. The following day, we shared a moment of reverence over our passions and for the sacredness of Mother Earth, and I wished Thunderfoot and Susan continued success, and they offered their blessings unto me. As I drove home, I understood that humans are one body, and we are connected as the arm needs the hand, and the hands need the fingers, and we are similar in every way, including our imperfections. Grace washed over me as I cherished a glimpse of the universal plan. Chapter 28. What goes around comes around. 2 months later, I was antsy. I'd been watering flowers and trying not to drown them when I heard 2 young boys scurry into the yard next door and hide behind the evergreens.
What are we going to do, Jason?
One of them asked urgently. Jason was about 5'4", slender, with brown skin, and had a head full of curly black hair. He wore a yellow shirt and black jeans rolled 3 times at the cuffs, which settled on high-top gym shoes. He stood with one foot out from the other, and when he spoke, he punctuated his words with his hands. And the other boy was white and wore a green shirt and jean combination. The problem they discussed had pulled up on the sidewalk outside the yard they were hiding in, because half a dozen neighborhood kids were skidding their bikes outside the shrubbery. "I know what we're not going to do, and that's leaving this yard," Jason said. "They're out there waiting to jump us."
We better stay here till they're gone,
the white boy said. "Can't your dad do something about this?" Jason asked.
He's out of town working on some big case, but he told me before he left that we should stick together.
"You better hide, nigger!"
a voice shouted from the street.
"We're gonna get you and your nigger-loving friend!"
I walked briskly from the yard and came upon the boys on the bikes, grabbing the handlebars of the bully. "Who are you?" The kid started to stutter, and I repeated my question more slowly this time. "Who are you?" He started to respond. "Don't say a word," I said. The boys strolled out of the yard, and I turned back to the kid who'd been yelling. "Which is the nigger, and which is the nigger lover?" The harasser looked bewildered at the question. He shifted uncomfortably on the bike seat, shook his head sideways, and was scared. "These 2 guys are friends of mine. If I hear you call these kids names again, or if anything happens to them, I will find your parents, get a rope and a tree, and hang them. Do you understand? And tell your parents what I've said." I let go of his handlebars. The bikers tore off down the street, and not one of them looked back. "You guys live close by?" I asked.
Right around the corner?
The white kid said. Looking at the African-American youngster, I stated, "Must be tough on you. I know you're Jason, and what's your name?" I asked the white kid. "We call him Webb Jr., Jason teased. "Why Webb Jr.?" I asked.
My father's name is Dan K. Webb,
The white boy said. "The U.S. attorney?" I asked. "And we're neighbors?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and Webb Jr. looked at me and nodded assuredly. After leaving, I returned to the yard and reflected on my encounter with Jason and Webb Jr. I'd be in prison if Dan Webb didn't sign off on my probation. And if I'd been in jail, I wouldn't have been available to intervene for the 2 kids. It was a providential moment and chain of events that put me in the right place at the right time to aid 2 boys who were just about the same age as I was when I'd met Larry Creep. I thought about transitions for children and how important they were. 3 years into my 5-year probation, William J. Martin petitioned Judge Bua and Dan K. Webb for my early release, and in 1985, I became a free man. And with my freedom came new ideas on how I wanted to live and what I wanted to do. When Miss Hope showed me the books in her basement, I recognized that she suggested making my world bigger with new experiences and memories. So I sold my house, bought a laptop, wrote, traveled, and chose a life of adventure and service. Chapter 29. Eightfold Path of Enlightenment. Fiesta Mexicana played seductively from the speakers at the Mi Casa Grill in Acapulco to attract January's hungry tourists. They, like me, were visiting Acapulco from cold weather climates. The beach below was filled with sunbathers on colored towels and children playing in the sand as white-tipped waves spotted the blue ocean under cotton candy clouds. "Something to eat today, Jim? Anna made guacamole this morning, which is delicious." "See, Roberto, excellent." "Jim, my sister Anna likes you. Why don't you ask her to eat with you? I will cook for you. I'm sorry, Roberto. I'm waiting on another. He looked around to see who was coming. Who? I see no one coming. You sit like a person waiting for a bus. Anna is waiting for a bus, too. She hopes you are the driver of her bus. Anna stood smiling at the kitchen door. Her brown hair matched her large eyes, and the color of her snug jeans and pink tank top revealed a tight midriff, nicely rounded breasts, and a large silver crucifix between her cleavage. I pointed to the cross. Jesus is a lucky man to have such a comfortable bed.
See, Jesus is very comfortable.
Anna smiled and said, I'm sorry, senorita, your beauty is what I crave, but I must leave and study with Ramon. Please forgive me. I'm a determined traveler and cannot harm your soul. She smiled.
Nonsense. I think you and Ramon are secret lovers.
I saw Ramon entering his storefront, excused myself to Roberto and Anna, and proceeded to the orange cushions at Ramon's altar. Open floor-to-ceiling windows allowed sunlight to pour onto the interior walls, and out from the windows below I saw the great Pacific Ocean's blue water. On the altar were freshly cut flowers, and a large plaque of the Eightfold Path of Enlightenment, which read, Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right concentration, right mindfulness. I sat in a chair with palms up and gazed at the Dharma wheel and the 8-spoked mental concepts meant to provide strength in the voyage from birth to the grave. I inhaled the comfort of the altar and then exhaled my cravings for Anna as Ramon bowed and knelt facing the shrine. He stretched his hands outward towards the altar and spoke, his voice echoing slightly in the hollowed room. What is your memory today, Jim? It's 1967, and I'm having a flashback and fighting with my father. It's a survival response of not mentally submitting. I flash forward to a 1986 memory, and I'm speaking with a psychiatrist who states that I have shell shock and compares my experiences to prisoners of war who continue to relive the events for the rest of their lives, defeated in fear, depression, and sadness. The psychiatrist is suggesting medication as a form of treatment. And how are you responding? I asked the doctor, if I don't return to the prison cell and instead replace the old memories with new positive ones, will I still need drugs to cope? And what did the good doctor say? He said it was logical, but conveyed it was difficult because of family dysfunction. I also asked the doctor if he had taken any drugs himself to see if they worked or were harmful. And he said no, that he was trusting the pharmaceutical companies. I believe, in time, results will show Big Pharma addicted, trusting patients. After the meditation, I gazed out the windows through binoculars. I saw children on the beach jumping over patches of ocean green seaweed as they threw a yellow frisbee as vacationers strolled around them. A child hurled it into the air, and it swayed side to side like a kite, then glided down to their outstretched hands. I saw a tourist woman walking towards them when a child's foot suddenly snagged in the seaweed. He sprawled face first in the sand and crunched over in pain. The woman stopped, checked the child's foot, and spoke to the other children, and a few of them ran towards a hotel. The woman raised her face towards the hillside and gazed intently like a statue, looking for help to arrive. She had shoulder-length black hair that the breeze moved softly around her face, big brown eyes, and full red lips. She was wearing a stylish black and brown bathing suit, and the muscles in her long tanned legs were very well defined. Next, I saw another woman from the hotel run through the crowded beach, greet the boy, and thank the helpful woman in the bathing suit. The tourist woman continued her walk down the beach, climbed through the sand, and entered the Acapulco Plaza Hotel. I put the binoculars down on the windowsill and thought, she was the only one who had stopped to help the child, and I was checking into that hotel shortly. Later that night, I was sitting on a couch in the lobby of the Acapulco Plaza and reading a Mexican newspaper. The tourist woman from the beach walked by me and towards the street, entering Acapulco's nightlife. She wore a snug white mid-thigh skirt and a light blue sleeveless satin blouse with black buttons, and around her neck sat a silver brooch outlined with red coral. I watched as she stretched out a leg to admire her shoes, and the evening light defined her firm, tan calf. Screw me, I thought. She walked to the street and crossed. My line of sight was interrupted by a truck driver honking the horn. The workers were standing over the side of the farm truck, yelling at someone on the opposite side. The truck crept forward to reveal the tourist woman walking on the sidewalk with her head looking straight ahead, acting like she hadn't noticed the men hurling their approval of her presence. I walked across the street briskly and walked behind her, blending against the other tourists, raising the Mexican newspaper at times so she couldn't see my intrigue. She stopped and waited in line at Carlos and Charlie's, a favorite dining spot in Acapulco, and as fate would have it, I suddenly was graced to find the courage to stand directly in line behind her. "Is there a beauty pageant in Acapulco this evening? You will certainly win Most Beautiful Contestant."
Whatever,
she responded. I continued. "I saw a remarkable thing a few hours ago. A Mexican boy fell on the beach, and a woman stopped to help the child." Her eyes became intrigued, and she said,
I too saw something remarkable. A dumb American was reading a Mexican newspaper upside down in the lobby of the Acapulco Plaza Hotel 10 minutes ago. Was that you?
she asked, staring at the newspaper I held under my arm. Just then, the maitre d' came out of the door. "Your reservation number, madam?"
I don't have one. I didn't get a number when I made the reservation.
"I'm sorry, madam. How many are in your party?"
Just one.
she said, staring at me. "I'm sorry, but we only have tables for 2 or more." "I have a reservation number," I said. "Perhaps we could have a table for 2. I'm rich, and will buy the senorita whatever she wants." Chapter 30. Dear Maria. The maitre d' led us to a mezzanine table, and on our left sat the Acapulco mountain skyline, the city's twinkling lights mirroring the city moonlight flickering on the ocean. The restaurant was downwind of the Acapulco garbage dump, which burned off its debris nightly, but the odor faded from my consciousness as I watched the candlelight dance in your beautiful brown eyes. You were quiet and waiting for me to say something. I coughed slightly, and you said,
You're a day late. I'm leaving on the first flight in the morning.
"Technically, I'm not that late. My flight was canceled in Mexico City, and I tried to call the hotel, but the operator did not understand. I'm sorry. Maybe someday we'll have small phones we can carry in our back pockets, and your phone will look very nice in your back pocket, and I'll be able to call you directly,"
And I'll be able to hang up on you directly.
she said. It even sounded lame to me. Fortunately, before the situation could escalate, the waiter showed up to ask if we wanted to order.
The most expensive thing you have. The American is paying.
I nodded to the waiter and turned back to you. "Are you going to leave tomorrow?"
Jim, you knew I had a conference in Montreal. I'm so angry, and I'm leaving Acapulco tomorrow morning.
"Okay, I'm sorry. I know this relationship is difficult, and I thought I would come to Toronto. Do you know that you were the only one who stopped for the child today? That's why I love you."
It takes more than love. It takes commitment. I'm moving on. I've met someone else.
You clapped your hands in an Italian disdain. The wind must have shifted because suddenly all I could smell was the smoke from the trash dump.
He's a pilot for Alitalia Airlines. He's charming. He's Italian. Both our families come from Monteleone, Italy, and we have a tradition in common. I'm meeting him later at the Hacienda Disco, and I will dance with him and wear out the soles of my Calvin Klein shoes. As if you know anything about Calvin Klein or fashion.
The waiter appeared again and asked if we were ready to order. "What dish takes the longest to prepare?" I asked.
Revenge and meatballs. And you are a donkey.
You snapped, throwing the linen napkin in my face as you departed the restaurant. Dear Maria, in a flashback, I saw us meeting in 1987 at Carlos and Charlie's while traveling with friends. There were no tables for two, so the maitre d' put us together in a party of 4. You spoke freely about your family's migration from Italy to Canada in 1957. As we discussed the cultural differences between our countries, you expressed your understanding of American fashion, but could not comprehend America's racism. You were open with your feelings on family, sophisticated in every sense, and had a vibrant simplicity at your core. Life was not complicated. You could live in the moment, and life was personal but not selfish, and your kindness flowed quietly, like a stream with no beginning or end, and yet your curtness showed all the men you had dismissed. After dinner, we danced until your feet hurt, and I carried your shoes as we walked back to the hotel along the beach. The next day, we had lunch at an Italian eatery where you ordered for us, and we chatted about our lives and thoughts on family and children. Over the next 2 days, we fell deeply in love and made footprints in the sand and won heart with our hands. Dear Maria, I walked over to the Hacienda Disco, looked for you, and saw you waiting for the pilot alone. As I approached you, I took 2 matching watches from my pocket and gave you one. These are for us. Please come visit me in Chicago after your conference, I asked.
I have visited you so often that immigration has flagged me, and they think I'm trying to move without permission. I have one more visit before U.S. immigration removes my visa, and I've told you all this. I want to know something. When you look at me, what do you feel?
I feel safe,
Safe?
you asked, astounded. There was noise from behind, and the airline pilot had arrived. He kissed you on both cheeks and introduced you, in Italian, to his crew. You looked at me while you fumbled for an introduction.
He's from Chicago and is leaving.
The pilot took his hand and fingers, made a gun, looked at his crew, laughed, and playfully aimed at me. Bang, Al Capone, eh? Mafia, eh? Everybody thought this was funny. Then I looked at you and then at the floor.
Give me a moment.
You told the pilot, took my hand and walked me to the door.
I want to be more than safe. Seriously safe.
Then you shook your head. I'm trying. I'm scared and don't know how to live with or without you. I don't know what to do or how to do it, and I don't want to ruin your life.
Do you want to ruin my life?
You asked as a matter of fact. No, of course not, I said.
Then you won't. And I don't want this.
And handed me back the watch. Dear Maria, you arrived at the pilot's table and didn't turn to acknowledge me, and I had been reduced to just another admirer hoping for a chance to catch your smile. Feeling desperate and alone, I returned to the Acapulco Plaza. The following day, I went to say farewell to Ramon. I'm leaving today, and I wanted to say goodbye. Ramon was surprised, and I explained to him the current state of my relationship with you. But you love Maria, and love is essential to the human journey. I'm not worthy for such a woman. She only sees goodness and has not experienced tragedy. So? He asked. So, I'm the problem. Maria is by nature healthy, and I am damaged? Ramon asked. I nodded. Fear, anger, and temptations entice me daily. How could I ever inflict this life on Maria? How does she make you feel? He asked. Safe. And when I told her that, she became annoyed and said she wouldn't see me again. She called me a donkey and threw a napkin in my face. A donkey? He laughed. Yes, and that's a first. Consider this, he said. You can manage your struggles and merge into her reality, and use her nature as a shield against what attacks you. Is that possible? I asked. She neither sees nor feels what you feel, and you may dwell safely in her space. And me? I asked. Suffering and temptations will attack you. Seek goodness in the middle of the temptation, and place right thinking in what you believe, and you will become stronger. Have you ever faced the evil you describe? I asked. Yes. My moment led me to be a teacher, and teaching reinforces my beliefs. He spread his hands to frame the altar. One must seek evil. I prefer the temple's sanctity, and you are always welcome here. Goodbye, Maria. On the drive to the airport, I rewound our memory and became encased in sorrow. Where to? The taxi driver asked. Las Vegas, I replied. Chapter 31. Pleasure Escape. The baggage carousel swirled around at Las Vegas McCarran Airport, matching the highlight wheel in my brain. The spinning made me dizzy with stagnant energy, and I felt like a dead fish floating on top of a puke pond. Where to? The cabbie asked sullenly. The Flamingo, I said. Good choice, the cabbie said. The Flamingo was the first casino built on the Las Vegas Strip, and the founding operator was Bugsy Siegel and New York mob money. Bugsy Siegel had an idea about building a casino, and look at Las Vegas now. Are you staying long? Maybe. I'm not sure. It depends if I win, I said. The Flamingo's revolving door sucked seductively as dings of fruit machines enticed me to wonder if I could win too. In front of me was a no-limit blackjack table presenting 4 hopeful men and a blonde dealer flipping the cards without an expression. The dealer's hair was long blonde and settled onto the red ruffled blouse she wore over a black mini dress. Her long fingers were tipped with pearled nails as her hands floated like a magician above the card chute. She flicked her right hand when bets were set with the precise amount of velocity to deliver the cards in front of the players. Between pitches, she raised her eyes and glanced up at the glass ceiling. Reflex dealers developed under the steady gaze of security cameras. I also glanced toward the glass ceiling, and she blinked to cover her surprise, and when she looked my way again, I darted my eyes toward the ceiling again. Amused by my little game, she gestured toward an empty chair, and I stepped forward, staring into her deep, gray eyes, removed my money clip, and peeled off 10 Benjamin Franklins. She counted, picked up the money, and informed the pit boss she was extending 10 chips. The boss nodded and then looked curiously at what I was going to do, and I placed every chip in the betting circle. All in, I said. I received my first card face down and a king of spades up. Her cards were a 10 and 2, totaling 12. I'll stick, indicating I was playing my dealt cards. She took one more card, a queen of diamonds, giving her 22.
You win. King on top of queen,
she said coyly. Works for me. I'm in room 1000, I responded.
Don't run off,
she said, nodding to a sign on the wall which read,
You can't win if you don't play.
I opened the door to room 1000, flicked on the lights, and left the drapes closed. I placed my shoulder bag on the bed, stretched up beside it, and thought, how could I have been so stupid? I lost a beautiful future with Maria, and there was nothing I could do. She ended our relationship when she gave me the Italian slap with her hands. She was brilliant and vanished like a firefly in the night. Adios, Maria. You are the only one for me, and deserve much more than a proposal of madness. All the best, Jimmy. Back on the casino level, the aroma of players smelt in the air around snares designed to catch fatted prey who hadn't a clue how the action was controlling them. I studied the players and saw nuances that betrayed their hands, how their eyes blinked, their faces twitched, and how they held the cards. Every player showed some reaction to every card, even the dealers.
Do you like to watch? Or are you a gambler?
I turned around, and it was the dealer who dealt me the winning hand. I'm here to win or die like Elvis, I said. What's your name?
Pleasure.
Pleasure is all mine, Pleasure,
We'll see.
she pouted.
You played one hand and took 1,000 off me.
She slipped her hand into a pocket on her dress, pulled out a deck of red playing cards, leaned against me, and shuffled the deck.
Don't look so sad,
she said.
You want a private game.
Maybe later, I muttered. I ordered a cheeseburger from room service from a lobby phone, and in the elevator, I thought about Maria and felt nauseous. I wondered why I came to Las Vegas and about getting high on recreational drugs. No one cared what I did. 30 minutes later, there was a knock at the room door. I expected a cheeseburger, but instead, it was Pleasure. She slid by me, found the nightstand light, flicked it on, plumped up 2 pillows, leaned back on them, and arched her body toward me.
You're a cautious one?
She said. She reached over to the bedside table, lifted the ashtray, and placed it on the bed at her side. She put a large white rock at the end of a glass pipe, lifted it to her mouth, then lit the pebble with a green lighter, inhaling deeply and exhaling a long cloud of white smoke. She quickly laid the pipe and ashtray back on the table and started writhing on the bed, feeling her breasts and petting the kitty.
Help me feel good now, before the rush goes away.
I didn't move and watched her squirm for 30 seconds, and then she relaxed in a heap as the high left. Next, her eyes opened quickly, and she reached for another rock and loaded the pipe again.
This one's for you, Elvis.
I was stunned, and her shaking was intoxicating. She motioned me over, demanding that I join her.
Let's have fun. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
I didn't care what happened to me. Now, it was about feeling good, and I crawled onto the foot of the bed, and she sat straight up to shift her body towards mine.
Breathe the smoke in and blow it out here,
She said, petting her kitty again.
Hold the pipe in your mouth and puff like it's a cigarette, but hold it in after you taste the smoke,
She said as she inserted the pipe in my mouth. Time slowed as the flame lit the rock's end, and she said seductively,
Pull, pull, pull.
The white smoke climbed to my mouth as her eyes waited for what came next.
Knock, knock.
Came the sound at the door.
Who's there?
I yelled and passed her back the pipe.
Room service.
Room service who? I asked. I swung off the bed and headed for the doorway as she turned the pipe and inhaled the smoke herself. After she crashed, she saw that I held the silver plate cover showing an appealing, tasty, mouth-watering cheeseburger and fries. I'm starving. I haven't eaten in 2 days because I broke up with Maria. And she called me a donkey. And that's a first, I moaned. Pleasure watched wide-eyed as I woofed down a big bite. Then I continued blathering. Did you know that the mystics believe that whatever a person seeks, they'll find? And temptation and evil are compelling in Las Vegas.
You're calling me evil?
Pleasure asked as she gathered the party supplies and put her coat on. No, I believe I may die, and it will not be today. Have something to eat. You'll feel better. Pleasure lifted a French fry off the platter and threw it at my chest as she walked out of the room.
You are so stubborn. Knock, knock, who's there? Maria is right. You are a donkey.
Chapter 32. Win if you don't play. I started the meditation standing in the sand on a beach in Southern California. The water rolled softly from the deep blue ocean and settled quietly on my toes. I bent over and scooped up a handful of white sand, holding it for a moment before letting it slip through my fingers until only specks of gold were left. I stretched right to the left and created a triangle with my hands, summoning the stream of sunlight across the blue ocean and into my thoughts. And above the safety of the calm waters and blue skies, I felt myself accessing the files where I'd stored the mental snapshots of many spiritual disciplines and petitioned the memories for strength. Then, without warning, I witnessed the horrors of children being abused, only to pass the abuses to their offspring from generation to generation. Next, I was in a glass elevator, descending in a blur of red lights, and halted abruptly on Dante Avenue. Tell the dealer I'm here to play a game of choice, I said. The bouncer mumbled through his headset, listened a moment, and then the big door swung open, and the first thing I saw was a headline that read, "You can't win if you don't play." Walking further down the hallway, I stopped at the next wall that read, Dead Wall of Fame. Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, Heath Ledger, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Amy Winehouse, Chris Farley, John Belushi, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, and Jimmy Heaney. At the end of the corridor, a door opened as I approached, revealing a dimly lit casino packed with gamblers and sexy servers delivering alcohol to the clientele, making it impossible for them to stay focused on the big score. A purple door blinked at the edge of a raised stage, and a dealer occupied a single table with his back facing the players. On the left side of the room, parents started arguing at a table, and two small children sat at their feet, intently watching them, and the parents were oblivious to the children. Moving quickly through the crowd, the dealer inquired, "How are you, my old friend?" I stopped dead in my tracks, because I was sure the dealer would be Larry Creep, but I was very wrong. The dealer pushed out the empty chair with his foot and gestured for me to sit. "Don't look so surprised," Cody Jarrett said. "You've been the dealer in this game for some time now." I sat down and mumbled, "I'm here to win today." Cody Jarrett flipped the first card over, and it was the face of Larry Creep. "May I ask you a self-pity question? How's your life going? I know you've had it difficult. Larry took your hopes at such a young age, and you have watched as other kids advance without a burden. Is being jealous because your life was destroyed important?" I looked into the eyes of Cody Jarrett and nodded yes, and he flipped another card with my father's face. "Your father betrayed you," Cody Jarrett said, "and it hurts more than you could ever describe." I nodded yes, and Cody flipped another card with my mother's face. "Your mother cared more about drinking than you. What kind of mother lets a father break her children? You carry deep sadness in your soul because you will never be able to trust Maria." I nodded yes, and he flipped a card with the face of my brother Tommy. "You could have prevented Tommy's death, and you left him and hung out with your friends. You killed Tommy. It was not my fault. How could I have known?" I whimpered. "You knew your dad wouldn't watch him. You can't lie to Cody Jarrett. I was there." Face up on the table sat the evidence that reflected a life under siege, and my hand shook because I wanted desperately to pick up the cards and play them. "Play the cards," Cody Jarrett hissed. "Pleasure will help you forget." Guilt, rage, and lust dominated my thoughts. "I didn't know that Tommy would die," I stuttered. "You knew. You can't deceive Cody Jarrett. I was there." I ached for pleasure. I picked up the card holding my father's face and tapped it against my forehead. "How is your post-traumatic stress syndrome?" Cody Jarrett asked. "The doctor wanted to prescribe drugs to calm you. I was hoping you'd make the right choice because he had a solution. But you talked about a memory healing technique you dreamt up. No wonder the doctor was annoyed." "But you would agree the memory produces my fear and rage?" I asked. "Who cares? Our mother is breathing whiskey on her grandkids right now." My mind was frenzied. I was flashing on the memory file Mom and fighting with myself. I picked up the Tommy card and added it to my father's. "You know you're responsible for Tommy's death. Tommy had such a bright future, but you killed him. Kill your parents too." I opened the Tommy Dies document file, scanned my notes, and looked into Cody Jarrett's eyes. "Tommy died so I could become who I am." Next, I clicked on the icon of the doctor's face and scanned my notes. When I questioned him about replacing a traumatizing memory with a new one, he became impatient and dismissive. The memories of my childhood influence how I live today. I must replace old behaviors with new behaviors and create new files. Cody Jarrett twitched in anger. "Enough thinking! Find pleasure and play the cards!" I sat back in my chair, seeing the floor below the stage. The parents were still arguing, and their children were still waiting patiently. What would happen if parents evolved and became better? "Who cares, jerkface? Destroy yourself! You're a loser!" "A new memory," I said, "would bring self-esteem to the parents and a positive remembrance for the children. Generational trauma would be defeated. This file is called, 'There Are No Bad Children, Only Bad Parents.'" Dropping the cards, I envisioned a future time and place and stood across the street from a white 2-story house with a burgundy wraparound porch balanced perfectly in gardens, and I heard Miss Hope whisper,
"Much has been done to you. Much has been given to you. and much is expected from you.
Next, a blond-haired boy and his little sister appeared as the door opened, and Maria asked,
Where's Daddy? Lunch is ready. He's cleaning the pool for us,
the boy said. I gazed in awe and watched as they climbed the front steps and walked in the door, and Miss Hope whispered,
When they are born, you will be born again. When they cry, you will comfort them and comfort yourself. When they are happy, you will be filled with their joy. When they face transition, they will not be alone, and new memories will dwarf the old memories. Do not be afraid, for Providence surrounds you.
I'm out of this game, I said, and Cody Jarrett was deleted. Larry Creep suddenly appeared, dressed in the same green clothes as the day we met. His evil eye winked as his large black shoes spread out from underneath the table like vines reaching for my soul. You cannot quit, Larry Creep said. You came to me because you wanted to feel good. You've hated me so long, you don't know how to live without me. I saw all the cards staring up at me from the table. I want what's in the bag, too, Creep said harshly. No, I said. It's all I have left to play with. That's why I'm going to take it, Creep said with hate. Okay, I whimpered. Winner takes all. I'll play the cards. I took a card out of my bag and placed it on the table, and it read, You can't win if you don't play. Loser, Creep hissed. I win again! I hesitated a moment, then stared into Creep's evil eyes and flipped the last card, which read, with a red X through can't, You win if you don't play. Suddenly, the crowd beneath the stage floor were silent, and the parents reached down, picked up the children, and hugged them. Larry Creep was deleted, and a young 11-year-old little Jim Heaney sat in his place. We looked at each other briefly, and then little Jimmy rushed into my arms.
James, what took you so long? I have been waiting.
I was learning how to rescue us, I said. I'm here now.
I heard muffled sounds. I was buried so deep, but I trusted you would return.
You sound just like me, little man. That's something I would say.
You did say it, James. I'm you, and you are me.
Yes, we are one again. But now I need your help to forgive.
Sure, okay. Why not? But first, let's propose to Maria. And what's up with the mice?
Chapter 33. Immigrant Possibilities. After World War II, Italians endeavored to leave Italy due to their poor standard of living and lack of opportunities. Thousands immigrated to Toronto, Canada, where men arrived seeking greater possibilities for their families. Giovanni Colangelo and Carmela Manzara were among the immigrants, and this is their story. Maria had lived at home with her immigrant parents, and to say this was a colossal moment was an understatement, because she was moving to Chicago so we could be together, and we weren't married. We parked in front of the red brick house, and budding pink tulips graced a flower bed below the windows as the brown winter lawn turned into a lush springtime green. Gazing intently into the house, I saw parents staring out the window, which landed like a missile in the car's front seat. They don't look happy, I said.
Oh, I want you to know my father thinks you're using me for sex.
I grinned and asked, Anything else you want to mention before I explain what is happening here?
No, not that I can think of.
She joked. Papa greeted me with a firm handshake and was gracious and dignified. Mama stood over a waist-high black wrought iron railing at the top of the stairs, made her hand and finger into a gun muzzle, and pointed at me.
I do not like you. You take my daughter from me.
Clearing my throat, I said, I love the flowers, and the grass is turning green. I'm terrible. I can't grow anything, but I try. How do you know how to grow and keep things alive? We are from the hills of Monteleone in southern Italy. Do you grow fruits and vegetables? He asked. I kill the weeds. I'm very good at that. I smiled and said, That's an important job. The weeds choke everything. Papa said, smiling approvingly at his wife.
I do not like you. You take my daughter from me.
Mama repeated as she put her face in a handkerchief and wiped her eyes. Giovanni Colangelo showed me into the dining room, which was formal. In the center of the room sat a tan table of Queen Anne design, with 6 matching chairs curled down and sitting on a light green carpet. In the corner of the room was a matching cabinet with pull-out drawers at the bottom, and glass doors displaying delicate glasses, vases, and small artistic statues. The table held floral dishes, a plate with a large loaf of bread, and a long, sharp cutting knife. The lunch menu was on the table and included steaming linguine pasta, a red marinara sauce, meatballs, leafy salad, cucumbers, and tomatoes with fresh mozzarella cheese, which warmed up the chilled puzzle of what and why, where, when, and who I was. Why has it taken us so long for you to come and meet us? I wanted to, but Maria wouldn't invite me, and she called me a donkey. Maria couldn't believe what I had said and translated, and her mother smiled.
Really?
Maria asked, laughing. You come into my house to make a joke? Papa asked. No, sir, I did not. What are your intentions with my daughter? She wants her to move to Chicago to be with you? Papa asked. I want to marry today, but Maria won't marry me today. She is stubborn and doesn't want to leave your beautiful life. But we are in love. I live in Chicago, and she lives here with you.
Asina,
Mama said, patting Maria's hand softly, and Maria nodded in agreement with Mama. What's Asina mean? I asked Maria.
donkey. Stupida Asina,
Mom said firmly to Maria. I reached over, removed the knife from the bread tray, and set it on the table behind me. You're a smart boy, eh? Have you been in this situation before? Papa asked. No, I have not. And where will she sleep? Papa asked. She will sleep in the guest bedroom,
I don't believe you.
Mama said.
Mama and Papa, please give him a chance.
Maria asked patiently. My face became strained, and I looked down at the table to gather my thoughts. I'm sorry, I've never done this before, and I'm very nervous. I will start over. Papa nodded at me, and I said, I did not come to visit you because I was sure that at some point Maria would not want me, and she is so wonderful, and I couldn't believe that this could be real. And the pasta is so good. What's for dinner? And Mama put more pasta on my plate. But our love is real, and my heart is open, and that is all I know. And I will let go into the mystery of love and family. I promise we will marry in January of next year. Why not move it to Toronto? Chicago is dangerous, and we will worry about her. We don't know you. I understand, but I have a small construction business in Chicago, and I can take care of us there. I promise that we'll be married in January of 1992. Why January? Why not now? And we can celebrate here in Toronto. Details need to be worked out.
Like another family.
Mama asked. No, I haven't another wife or children. Maria is the first woman I have ever loved. The love makes people move from Italy to Toronto after the Great War, to begin new, even though it may not make sense to anyone but them.
I am?
Maria asked, smiling. Yes, you are, I added.
Fine. Then I accept your marriage proposal today.
I thought you already had, I mumbled, grinning. Her father sighed deeply, and I added, I know this is difficult, but what better way to gain your trust than keep my promise?
Papa and Mama, I'm going to Chicago with Jim. It's what I want to do. I must live my life.
Maria's father recognized his daughter's firmness, and after lunch, we went to the yard. Stepping through the door, I saw a deep yard, and along the fence, Papa had built wine gazebos where bare vines were starting to show tiny red grapes. Beyond the grapevines were individual vegetable gardens with walking paths in between. The gardens were raised off the ground and surrounded by small railroad ties and black dirt. The rest of the yard showed trimmed grass and small fruit trees bursting with tiny white flowers. Your yard is amazing. You like it? Do you know what we are growing? He asked. I shook my head no. On the vines, we grow grapes because we like to eat and make wine. We have tomatoes, lettuce, cucumbers, peppers, onions, and herbs in the gardens. And the trees have got the apples, pears, and the peaches. The weather has been a-changing and tricking the trees into thinking it's a time to grow a fruit. Sometimes it snows in April, affecting the summer's bloom if it gets cold again. The yard is a small, but we love our small yard, and it makes us feel like our Italy. I was struggling, but built on the conversation. Giovanni, why did you leave Italy for Toronto? I asked. He laughed and proudly said, For a better life. Was it hard in Italy? I asked. We lived in the hill town of Monteleone, a province of Foggia in Apulia in southern Italy. I'm the oldest of 5 boys, and the Colangelo name is one of Monteleone's longest historical bloodlines. My father taught me and my brothers trades for the Monteleone shops. One of my brothers is a shoemaker, one a barber, one a hairdresser, one a tailor, and I am a carpenter. Carmela's papa and mama owned a farm that grew vegetables and supplied Monteleone and neighboring towns with milk, cheese, meats, and grain. So, you and Carmela were both from Monteleone? I asked. Yes, we went to the same grammar school and met at St. John the Baptist in Monteleone. Carmela and I would see each other on Sundays at Catholic Mass and functions at the church. He flashbacked into his memory. Sundays in Monteleone were a celebration beginning with a morning Mass, followed by afternoon festivities. The evenings centered around dinners that the ladies of Monteleone would prepare in advance and share amongst the parishioners of St. John. As teenagers, Carmela and her sisters would bring the cheese and grain to the food store, and I worked at the furniture store across the street. I knew of the days and times Carmela would be at the grocery store, so I was sure to find a way to be outside on the road to see her. My boss would nod and tease, Say hi to your beloved Carmela. Slowly, as the days of the week passed, we would look forward to seeing each other again at St. John's on Sundays. Giovanni laughed. I'd tell her stories my grandfather told me about life beyond Monteleone. Carmela would make fun and say, You're a carpenter and have never been anywhere but Monteleone. Then World War II came because of the dictator Benito Mussolini. What was he like? I asked. Mussolini was popular, wrote stories for an Italian newspaper, and formed the National Fascist Party. His power grew, and he became Italy's dictator. Did you fight in the war? I asked. I was drafted into the army, trained as an armored tank driver, and fought in North Africa. My tank was blown up, and I was in an underground bunker with another guy. His eyes glanced up at the sky as he spoke. We heard of the planes which signaled the bombs would fall from the sky. The bombs were very close, and we were in the bunker for 2 days. Boom, 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 all around us. Trees fell, and the ground shook. In between the bombs falling, this guy said he was from Toronto, Canada. His name was Luigi, and his father lived near Monteleone. Luigi said his parents left Italy for Toronto in 1920 because of a lack of food and education. Luigi told me stories about Toronto, and he reminded me of my grandfather. Then we heard the planes above, and bombs started again. Boom, boom, boom. And all around us, trees fell, and the ground shook. I thought I was going to die in that hole. And then it stopped for about 10 seconds, and Luigi spoke softly through the dark. Millions of people in Toronto need a good carpenter, barber, shoemaker, tailor, and hairdresser, and you should all move to Toronto. He made the joke. Then we started laughing, and the bombs fell again. Boom, boom, boom. Luigi said he would sponsor me, and I promised to tell my brothers that we were going to Toronto if I survived the war. And Carmela? Where was she? I asked. Monteleone had a revolt because sisters from a farm got angry because the police confiscated food they were bringing to the people of Monteleone. The sisters protested, were brought to the mayor, and were locked in a warehouse filled with cheese and other stolen foods. The women were amazed to see that the mayor was hoarding the food they were delivering for fear of Monteleone being invaded by the Allies, and the 3 sisters set the warehouse on fire and escaped. Hearing of the stolen food, a mob formed, and the police station stormed. Police had trouble controlling the riot and fired guns into the air, and hundreds of citizens were arrested. The revolt was the first in Italy during World War II. When I returned to Monteleone, Carmela was to be married to a landowner's son who owned the farm near them. How did she feel about that? I asked him. Carmela was sad and felt the pressure from her parents to marry the other man. So I persuaded the guy not to marry Carmela. And soon after, we were married at St. John the Baptist. How did you persuade him? I asked. I asked him if he loved Carmela, and he said no. Then I asked him why you would marry a woman you no love. He laughed and wished me well. And here we are. I smiled and said, You are a brave man, Giovanni. Grazie, he said. After the war, I sailed across the Atlantic Ocean, and there was a big storm, and I think I will die again. I arrived in Nova Scotia, and I took a train to Toronto, and Luigi got me a job as a carpenter. I was lucky to be in that bunker, because it changed our lives. I came to Toronto by myself in 1951, Carmela got here in 1954, and Maria was born in 1956. He paused and reflected. You know, Maria had an older sister who died in Monteleone? Yes, I saw a picture. What happened? One day, she got an infection, and no doctors were nearby. We watched her die, and my wife cried all the time. She was our first baby, and we loved her so much. After a few moments, he sighed, and his eyes pierced. So, I tell you our story and life in Italy, and you see our garden. What you do now is no joke. We are not a fearful people, and you don't want me as an enemy. You must tell me something now, or she cannot go with you. So, I ask you now, what is this thing you want to say? Does Maria know what this thing is? We gazed upon his yard, and I said, I imagine it must have been difficult being alone in Toronto while Carmela was in Italy. The United States Immigration Department can be challenging, but I have a daring plan. It's best at this time that everyone is protected. I promise we will be married quickly, and I will return with Maria in early February, and we will celebrate our marriage in Toronto. Today, I ask permission for your daughter's hand in marriage, and I will not violate your life, journey, or ancestors. And how do I keep my wife from crying? He asked. I paused and didn't know what to say, and he answered his question. And then, children. We have no grandchildren, and you are not Italian, but that is okay. It is better to have a clever, qualified man who loves my daughter and asks my permission for her hand than an Italian man who may never come to the door. But remember this. We are tanto intelligentsia. Your children will have much intelligence. I nodded, and then Maria and her mother walked into the yard.
Papa, Mama said I could go with Jim. There's no disagreement between us, and Mama knows I must do this.
He looked around the yard to see if anyone was listening and whispered, The 3 women in the revolt were Carmela and her sisters, and the Manzara girls can be testy. Don't get Maria angry because you need to sleep with one eye open, and she will not cook for you. Copy that, sir, Mama announced.
Welcome to the family. I've made cannolis.
Grazie. I smiled and nodded. On the way back to the house, I stopped and gazed upon Giovanni and Carmela's yard, and felt graced that I was in the presence of their love, struggles, and determination. The thought that Giovanni Colangelo was in a foxhole under attack with Luigi from Toronto, whose family lived nearby Monteleone, Italy, was not a coincidence. And decades later, an intersection of countries and continents occurred. Maria from Toronto, Canada, packed a suitcase for Acapulco, Mexico, while Jimmy Heaney from Chicago simultaneously packed a suitcase for Acapulco. I understood that if these courageous immigrants hadn't dreamt of opportunities and better educations and sailed the ocean to North America, Maria and I would have never met. Meeting in Mexico was fate. Chapter 34. Married to an Immigrant. United States immigration law stated, aliens who entered a valid marriage with a United States citizen made them an immediate relative under the U.S. immigration laws. In 1992, 1 million immigrants in California had become overstays, meaning they entered the United States legally and overstayed the visa requirements. Maria was considered an overstay. So, California was the perfect place to get married. Maria's temporary visa had expired, so that every detail would require flawless execution. If everything went well, Maria would enter the immigration process having documents showing a marriage license and marriage certificate. I promised Giovanni Colangelo that Maria and I would return to Toronto in February as man and wife. I had 8 months to keep my promise. However, it would be a hectic exercise. The first step was to have Maria forward her Toronto mailing address to my Chicago address. The second step meant visiting the Civic Center in Santa Ana, California, to obtain a marriage license and certificate. Maria was not interested in the little details and enjoyed buying a wedding dress. On January 27th, 1992, we drove through the winding road up towards the Santa Ana, California courthouse, where homeless people protected tents and possessions while extending dirty styrofoam cups, hoping that money would fill them. I gazed intently beyond the tent dwellers and saw the municipal castle, which held our future in its hands. Maria wore a white chiffon satin wedding dress, draped softly over her shoulders, tightened at the hips, and flowed out on the tips of her shoes. Her soft hands held a pink bouquet, and a satin tiara graced her light, streaked, reddish-brown hair, and she looked like a princess. Most in the room stopped what they were doing and noticed us as we sat down. The marriage office was timeless, with immigrants holding identification, sitting in chairs waiting patiently to be married, their hope being the same as forefathers who sat before them, a desire for the American dream. I thought about Giovanni and Carmela Colangelo, and my soon-to-be wife, Maria Colangelo. I thought about the Mexican children with a dreamer's opportunity at public education, and the possibilities before them in the United States of America. A future president could be a descendant of an immigrant sitting in the Santa Ana Municipal Building. A prominent Hispanic woman stood behind the counter reviewing papers, and another staff member would ask her a question that suggested that she was important. Occasionally, she gazed at Maria sitting in a brown folding chair in her wedding dress, and a soft grin appeared. So I approached her. "Good morning."
Buenos dias.
"Very beautiful, yes?"
Sí.
she replied. "We would like to be married, and I would like to speak to the Deputy Commissioner of Marriage,"
That would be me.
she replied firmly. I cleared my throat and said, "We've come from Chicago to be married,"
Why Santa Ana? Why not Chicago?
she asked. "I heard that the Commissioner of Marriage is a compassionate soul, wise, and sees beyond borders."
And you can't get a marriage license in Chicago, correct?
"Yes," I replied. Her eyes pierced, and she asked,
Are you in trouble?
"Yes, we are deeply in love," I said, "and cannot live apart, and wish to be married today." Her eyes hesitated, and I moved so she could see Maria in her beautiful wedding dress again. I whispered, "This will be Maria's only wedding day, and you will be our most important guest. We will have children who will add to the betterment of others." She sighed, buried under work, and reached for the license forms.
Very well. Go to your beloved and fill out these papers, and I will call you when I'm ready to marry you.
When I returned to Maria, she asked,
What happened?
"We're getting married today," I replied.
Really?
"Yes," I whispered, as she rested her head on my arm. The window showed the homeless mulling around the grass, guarding possessions when the sprinkler sprayed, creating bedlam, and the destitute scurried to relocate assets from getting wet. I flashed back to an earlier time zone and remembered sleeping in my car and wondering, why was I inside the Santa Ana Municipal Building getting married to Maria, and the homeless hadn't any shelter? Sniffling a little, Maria looked up at me and asked,
Are you crying?
"A little bit," I said.
Why?
She asked. "I got the girl I wanted. It always felt like this is supposed to happen." The commissioner of marriage announced,
Maria Colangelo and Jim Heaney?
"That's us," I whispered. At the counter, the commissioner said,
You are much too beautiful, Maria, to be married at this window. There is a floral garden outside where I will perform the wedding vows, and I will meet you there in 10 minutes.
We stood admiring the flowers, and some homeless people approached, and Maria said,
We are getting married here, and I want you and your friends to be our guests. Please invite everyone.
The justice of the peace appeared with the Bible in hand, and she was surprised to see the garden surrounded by the homeless.
Our attendees.
Maria said. We took our vows together, and Maria said,
I do.
and I promised, to love Maria until my last breath. We were content, and on the plane ride home, I thought about having children and creating the circle of life.